welcome back to Kim Reads as we continue with Nancy Drew, The Haunted Carousel. Chapter 13, Telltale Prince. For a moment, Nancy stood paralyzed with fear. Then she roused herself to stop action and began shouting, "Stop! Stop!" at the top of her lungs. She had no idea where to find the switch for the houseboat's running lights, but darting back and forth inside, she at least turned on the cabin lights and snatched up her handbag. George and Bess had already been awakened by Nancy's loud cries. Bewildered but realizing that some sort of emergency had arisen, they had both jumped out of bed, wriggled into their robes, and followed her out the deck. The sight of the oncoming cruiser shocked them wide awake. Nancy plucked a small flashlight from her bag and began shining its beam back and forth. The two girls joined in her frantic shouts. Just in the nick of time, the high prow of the cruiser veered away. Presently, an angry male voice came below through an electric bullhorn at the three trembling girls. "What are you doing on the river without lights?" As the other craft maneuvered into position alongside the drift boat, Nancy was able to explain they had been securely moored at the River Heights Marina, but somehow the boat had become adrift during the night. The cruise skipper, by now sympathetic and concerned over the girls' plight, offered to tow them back to the marina if they could throw him their tow line. George hurried back forward to haul it from the water under the cruise's powerful searchlight. Nancy saw her grasp frown when the end of the rope was in her hand. "What's wrong?" "George, see for yourself, Nancy." The end of the rope had been cleanly and freshly cut. "We didn't just come adrift," George went on, putting their mutual thought into words. "Someone cut us loose from our mooring." Bess was nervous and shaken by this discovery, but Nancy tried to allay her fears. "Never mind. We can come worry about it later," she said. "The most important thing right now is to get back to the marina." George tossed the line into the waiting cruiser captain, and he took them promptly in tow. Within an hour, the girls were back safe and sound in their slip at the marina. After thanking their rescuer emotionally, they lost no time in crawling back to their bunks, and all three were soon sinking into exhausted slumber. Next morning, the girls slept late, and then after a light breakfast, Nancy dropped Bess and George at their homes and drove on to her own house. "Nancy, your dad called about an hour ago," Hannah Gruen greeted her. "He's going to be in court for the rest of the day, so he asked me to tell you that he talked to Mr. Trimble, and you're to call him when you get in." As she spoke, the housekeeper took Nancy's overnight bag and handed her a slip of paper bearing the lawyer's phone number. "Okay, Hannah, thanks." Nancy went to the front hall telephone and dialed the number. When Hannah returned a few minutes later, she was hanging up. "Well, I'm off to lunch with Mr. Trimble," the teenager reported. "It's the only time he can see me, so I'll just have time to change." 10 crowded minutes later, she was on her way to La Coulière d'Argent, the restaurant where she had arranged to meet the attorney. As she entered, Nancy was greeted by a dark-eyed waiter with a waxed mustache. "Mademoiselle Drew, Monsieur Trimble is waiting for you. Come this way, please." He waited to show her a table occupied by an elderly man with a mane of white hair. "So you're Carson Drew's daughter." The lawyer stood up with a smile and shook hands with the young sleuth. "I'm very grateful for you to see me on such short notice," Nancy dimpled. "Not at all, my dear. I don't often have a chance to lunch with a lovely young lady." After they ordered, Miss Trimble said, "Now, how can I help you, Miss Drew?" "I understand you were Mr. John Trent's lawyer. Could you tell me about him?" Nancy asked. "Well, there's not much to tell, really. John Trent was a self-made man. He started from scratch, opened up his small machine shop, and built into a major machine tool company, and made a fortune from doing so, I might add." "Do you know much about his background or past?" "Not a great deal. I gathered from various remarks he made over the years when he came from a poor background. And he certainly adored his only child, Joy, a lovely girl, by the way. Fred Trimble paused to offer Nancy a roll, then went on. He never spoke about his wife, you see. Apparently, her death must have been a bitter blow. I do know that after most of the time I served as his personal attorney, he employed babysitters and housekeepers to care for Joy. And then recently, his widowed sister, Selma Yodley, came to live with him to help out. He fell silent while the white-coated waiter served their eggs benedict. Once they were eating, Nancy said, Joy mentioned something about her Aunt Selma being her temporary guardian. The lawyer cleared his throat, looking slightly uncomfortable. You see, well, my client was concerned Joy might not be too happy under Aunt's guardianship, so he specified privately in his will that under certain circumstances, other arrangements might be worked out. You mean a different guardian might be appointed? Ahem. Once again, Mr. Trimble looked uncomfortable. I'm sorry, Miss Drew, but I'm not at liberty to discuss the subject. Joy is now 17. I can only tell you now that she reaches the age of 21, she'll become into her father's fortune. Until then, it will remain in trust under the control of myself, as the executor of estate, and her guardian, who at present is Mrs. Yawley. As she enjoyed her eggs benedict, Nancy sat thinking about Mr. Trimble's ways under certain circumstances. The question was, what circumstances? Only one thing seemed clear, Nancy reflected. John Trent must have been sensed instinctively that his sister Selma Yawley was not the ideal guardian for his beloved daughter Joy. The young detective and his elderly attorney finished their meal while chatting pleasantly about various subjects. Thank you for a lovely lunch, Mrs. Trimble, Nancy said as they parted. The pleasure was all mine, Miss Drew, I assure you. Nancy decided to call Joy Trent to arrange another visit that afternoon, but on her way to the Trent house, she stopped off at the police headquarters to speak to Chief McGinnis. Nancy, I was just about to phone you, the police chief, as she walked in his office. I just had a report from our finger lab about the stolen boat. They found the prints of the boat thieves? Nancy inquired hopefully. That's right, and believe it or not, they belong to Fingers Malone and Baldy Krebs. Our boys match them with a complete set of prints Detective Norris bought from us at the police department. Oh, wow. Nancy was excited. The news strongly suggested that Fingers and Baldy were the two dark figures whom she and Ned had seen on the carousel Monday night, and that they had made their getaway by stealing the boat, as she had already guessed. But why were they so interested in the carousel? After pondering for several moments, Nancy said, Chief, is Detective Norris still in River Heights? Yes, but he's keeping watch for those two crooks at Riverside Park. Is there any way I can reach him? Sure, no problem. McGinnis promptly had a radio call out to the policeman, Officer Doyle, asking him to have Detective Norris phone police headquarters. Within minutes, the telephone rang on Chief McGinnis' desk. Detective Norris was on the line, and after acknowledging the call, McGinnis handed the phone to Nancy. Nancy Drew here, she said. I'd like to ask you a question, Detective Norris. You told me Fingers Malone was almost caught at the park in St. Louis, but when Baldy Krebs wounded the arresting officer, did that by any chance happen at an amusement park, or was it just an ordinary public park? No, an amusement park, Miss Drew. What a growing feeling of excitement, Nancy continued. Did either of them have previous connections with the amusement park? I mean, for example, is where Fingers has usually operated as a pickpocket? Funnily, you should ask, Norris replied. As a matter of fact, Fingers Malone was caught in the same amusement park that I just told you he was sent to prison. You remember I told you he served 20 years of a 25-year sentence just before he broke out and became a fugitive? Well, it was really on account of that amusement park that he got sent up the first place. I'll tell you how it happened. Okay, this may be just me never never been in prison, but his sentence was almost up. Why not just serve the rest? Norris explained that at the time, Fingers was being hunted for his part in a serious gangland crime, quite different from his usual specialty of picking pockets. He had gone into hiding and could not be found. That one night, a prominent St. Louis businessman and jeweler got his pockets picked while he was at the park with his family. He was sore as the dickens and raised the roof down at headquarters. As a result, the chief of the bunco squad assigned an extra detail of detectives to patrol the park. And on the second night there, one of the spotted Fingers with his hand in a lady's purse and nabbed him right in the act. Detective Norris chuckled dryly over the phone and added, "Turns out Fingers had been lying low and working as a carny before in the amusement park while he waited for the heat to cool down. But he couldn't resist the temptation. Those expert fingers of his turned out to be his downfall." After thanking both Detective Norris and Police Chief McGinnis, Nancy drove to Joy's house in an optimistic frame of mind. Joy herself opened the door. "I saw you coming up the drive, Nancy. I'm so glad you came. I thought we might rack our brains a little over more your father's puzzle," Nancy said with a great smile. "Oh, great, I'm just in the mood." On entering the spacious front room, Nancy saw Joy's Aunt Selma seated in the front of the television set, watching an afternoon soap opera. "Oh, good afternoon, Mrs. Yawley," she said politely. The woman looked up and nodded coldly. Joy took Nancy on through the house to her father's study. No sooner had she closed the door behind them than she whirled eagerly to face her visitor. "Nancy, do you think I should get in touch with Mrs. Harrod, or even though Aunt Selma forbids it?" Nancy replied calmly, "I think you should be guided by your own conscience, Joy." A relieved smile came over the red face and she clapped her hands. "Now I'm going to do it." She started toward the phone, only to stop a short moment before lifting the receiver. "No, on second thought, I won't do it right now. Aunt Selma might listen in on the extension. It would just be like her to make an unpleasant fuss. I'll call later when she's out." Meanwhile, Nancy had already begun directing her out in the room, looking for iris clues and scrutinizing the many colorful objects with John Trent had decorated the study. Suddenly, Nancy zapped her fingers and exclaimed excitedly, "Joy, I think I found part of the answer." And that's the end of that chapter. See you later.